Okay, hello everyone. We are continuing with our program since we are a bit above time. Uh, this panel discussion will be dedicated to one very important question, which is, let's say, all countries in the region are facing the brain drain, economic migrations, the lack of people on census, and we are getting just we are getting into this problem in all these countries. Today with me, we have Gordana Radojević from Association of Statistics and Demographics from Montenegro. Also Andrea Mićanović, she's from Regional Youth Cooperation from Montenegro too. So we have like this Montenegrin side here. And on the left, and here we have Bojan Blaževski. He's from Meta News Agency from Macedonia, and we have Jasmin Hasić. He's a, let's say, professor in Sarajevo and Humanity in Action coordinator in Sarajevo. Welcome to this panel discussion. First, I will say that some countries that we are representing here conducted census last year, and some of countries did not. Some of countries had a census in delay of 20 years. Some countries didn't. So I will just briefly explain to people that in Bosnia we had a census in 91. In that period we were like around 4.5 million citizens in Bosnia. So 22 years after, in 2013, we had a 3.5 million, and now we have estimates, because in Bosnia we should have a census in 2023, but there is no law on a census yet. Nobody knows, will it happen, what's going to happen with the census in Bosnia. Now, by some estimations, in the last 10 years, almost 500,000 people left the country. Only in 2019, but some predictions also, according to working licenses that are issued in European Union for Bosnian citizens, like only in 2019, 56,000 people got the working permission in some country of European Union. So we are facing with a really big problem, especially because the young people are the generation who are mostly leaving the country, and they are not leaving the country because they just want to go somewhere else and come back with the money. No, they are moving back, and they are pulling out their families from Bosnia, and we don't have exact data. Especially with Bosnian census in 2013, that was a problem because that census was conducted in very strong political pressure atmosphere, and we had a lot of campaigns in order to have like ethnicity in the first place, that you should, for example, we had a campaign such it's important to be a Bosniak. We had some, for example, Croatian president in that time, Ivo Josipović, he also invited the Croatians from Bosnia to declare themselves as Croats. So that was like a very, very hard situation, and it was political question actually in Bosnia than the technical question with what it should be actually. So we will start with Bojan because there are the results of last census, which is conducted last year in Northern Macedonia, are published like few days ago. What's the situation in Macedonia regarding the census?
Yeah, well, actually, first set of data was published in March, and the census was conducted in September last year. And in North Macedonia, this is like first census after a period of 2 decades. So the last one was organized in 2001, and the results were published in 2002. And of course, the results are very interesting and unfortunately bad. The country lost 9.2% of its population. If we compare the results from 2021 with the results from 20 years earlier, or actually we lost 185,000 citizens. which is a lot for North Macedonia. Maybe this data for a bigger country are not something much, but if we take, for example, if we calculate the number of citizens, of residents that live in the second and third most populous city in Macedonia after Skopje, practically these numbers are equal to around 185,000. So we practically lost a lot of our population, and I think that this is a very big problem for smaller countries, especially for smaller countries, and especially for, I would say, intellectuals, and especially those who work like in the medical sector, doctors, healthcare workers. I would say that the average age of population is around 40 years, and we have 638,000 citizens under the age of 29, which is around 34% of the whole population are practically youngsters. And on the other side, I would also say that, for example, Skopje has, let's say, a record number of citizens like never before. We have like 526,000, only the city itself, and with suburbs around 600,000, which is like a huge number, an increase of 39% in comparison with 2 decades ago. So it means that not only people are going abroad from the countries, but also citizens from smaller cities or from the other cities are coming to Skopje, or practically 1/3 of the whole population live in Skopje. And if you take the neighboring cities like Tetovo, Kumanovo, Veles, which are 50 kilometers from Skopje, you have like 850,000 citizens live in this part of the country. So not half, but almost half of the populations live around Skopje. And I would say that practically the results are still from the census are still, 2 days ago there were published another results about the educational background of the population. So let's say that 1/3 of the population is only with elementary education, so elementary school, or without any education are 5.6% of the citizens. And I would say that I would like also to say one research from the Medical Chamber of Macedonia, one research that was conducted in 2019, and practically their results are saying that almost 12% of the doctors that have license, they practically went abroad. And the average age of those doctors that are going abroad is around 40 years. So they are doing their education, they are doing specialization, and at the period when they can change the elder surgeons or gynecologists, they simply go abroad to Germany or to other European states. So
yeah, that's pretty much the similar situation in Bosnia. We have it in education system. For example, in city that I'm coming from, Travnik, they almost fulfill one class of let's say gymnasium. That's a what's the real translation? Yeah, like a second middle school, let's say. And the young kids, they want to go to medical school because they want to go abroad immediately after they finish the high school. And also the situation, we will talk with it a bit more with Yasmin and Andrea. So, but I want to go back to Montenegro, because Montenegro, like Bosnia, we didn't conduct a census last year. Okay, we're supposed to have it next year. But what's the situation in Montenegro regarding a census? Why you don't have a census yet? Because I know that, and I wrote about it that census which is conducted in Montenegro in 2011 was marked as the one of the greatest census, and by methodology, by everything, by from the European Union. You get positive comments. So what's happening now in Montenegro?
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, I would like to mention that Montenegro was the first country in the region in 2011 by performing census according to international standards with high quality standards according to, especially in terms of accuracy and timeliness. But after 10 years, Montenegro is the only country that don't have information when census will be. The government of Montenegro adopted the census law yesterday, but we don't have information when census will be conducted. We'll see what happens during discussion in parliament, and it will be political decision. In any case, I would like to mention some data about population change in Montenegro in last 10 years, based on research on the impact COVID-19 that performed by Association of Statisticians and Demographers of Montenegro in cooperation with Center of Democratic Transition. Based on this research, we can conclude that population of Montenegro is devastated in 10 last year. Negative natural increase with negative migration, especially younger people, brought out population to the level of 15 years ago. Also, there are problems in aging population and brain drain. Data from European countries show that number of migrants has increased 4 times from Montenegro in last 10 years, while a recent survey indicates that 1/3 of a younger population want to leave the country because of the dissatisfaction with quality of life, quality education, etc. Based on these facts, if population trends remain the same, our forecast indicates that population of Montenegro could decrease by 10%. This can cause major problems in labor market as well as in fiscal policy and sustainability of our financial system. Therefore, we need completely different migration policy through the integrated approach, but not through fight against migration, as our politicians often point out. Freedom of movement is a fundamental right and should guaranteed by in both directions. Because of that, we need clear and new policy action through new policies, especially that having in mind that Montenegro does not have population policies and population issues are not adequately addressed through the other policies. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yasmin, you as a man who came back after 17 years abroad, and you had a career there, and
still regretting it.
Yeah, you're regretting it. Yeah, okay. So you think that you were not so smart when you decided to come back to Bosnia? Okay. Your organization, not your organization, but you were a part of analysis and one survey among young people in Bosnia, which showed us that actually more than a half of young people want to go abroad. Am I optimistic?
You're actually correct. So this is the statistics that we collected and analyzed in the past year for a new UNFPA study that encompassed over 5,000 respondents, and with more than 400 different questions that related to different perceptions and preferences of young people related to their migratory experiences, mostly outward, because we're not interested in the in-country mobilities, but also in the ways that young people perceive their own life in Bosnia, and also the ways that Bosnians who have already left the country, if they want to come back, under what reasons, and so on and so forth. The typical profile of a young person between 18 and 29 that wants to leave the country, this is what our study shows, is that it's a young person that doesn't trust the institutions of this country, thinks that the education sucks, there are no job opportunities, they're not willing to put up with the corruption, they have some migratory experience, so, and they also have networks of people who have left the country, so they can rely on several people to give them money or to provide them accommodation for a period of time until they settle or find a job, and so on and so forth. And of course, the funny sort of factor that contributes to a greater outward migratory sort of experience is that young people with no jobs, with no experience, are actually not very patient. They want to leave right now. They already know what the other generations have gone through. So it's not the generations who have jobs and have been in the system and got fed up by the system that want to leave. It's the people who have never been in the system at all. And this is the worst part. However, the discussion here is twofold. I think we, and even in the title of our panel, we sort of tend to focus on the brain drain, sort of migratory experiences of resourceful migrants, the educated ones, the ones who can contribute to different economies and so on and so forth. But we don't discuss the manual migrants, the people who actually are leaving the country to do some woodwork or metal or to work as nurses at the hospitals. Because if you take a simple statistics from Germany, there are now in Germany of 80+ million people, over 5 million people who need elderly care, which means there's job for everybody in Bosnia, everybody from the Western Balkans, because you would have to have enough nurses and enough trained people to take care only of German elderly. We're not paying attention to this. Second, we're not paying attention to the so-called, I call it the suspense-generated migration. There are so many studies conducted on how Bosnians, I'm referring to Bosnia, but I'm sure it also has different references and connotations to other countries. We have many studies that focus on conflict-generated diasporas that Bosnia produced in the 90s. Where are they? What did they do? How they can contribute to our economy? Do they send money? Do they not? Remittances and so on and so forth. But there hasn't been many studies in the past 10 years. Yep.
The estimates are telling us that there is 1 million Bosnians that are living abroad, actually.
These are actually very conservative. There are up to 2 million Bosnians living abroad, considering the generations and the kids and the mixed marriages and so on and so forth. But we don't know what the last generation of migrants, so I call them the suspense-generated migrants. Why? Because people leave this country in a very essence, if I had to put it in one sentence, because they live in a suspense. Every stage of their life is dependent on something else. If I finish high school, I want to go to university, I need money for this. Only when I get the money, I can go to the next step. When I finish university and I want to get married, I only need job to do it, or my spouse needs job to do it. So there is another step I need to go. If the two of us find a job, then we need to find an apartment. But if we don't find an apartment, then we can't get married, because it would be not enough money for us if I'm the only breadwinner, and so on and so forth. So each step in and a baby and so on. So each step in their life is conditioned upon completion of a previous step. And this creates a lot of suspense along young people who can't plan their lives in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, and so on and so forth. Where the situation drastically changes when they go abroad. They can immediately plan loans and kids and social welfare and schooling, and they can actually save money and go on a vacation. So for us also is important to understand that we need to categorize our young migrants and pay attention more not only to their preferences, but also to the policies that we fail to provide in understanding how their preferences are aligned with what we can offer them, as opposed to what other countries can offer them. Because they don't leave because we're not doing something. They're leaving because Germany is doing something to attract them. And we're now at the stage where we cannot counter the German policies. And we cannot rely on the love and affection and emotions of young people to stay here and continue living in suspense when there's another country where they can immediately after 1 year buy an apartment or at least get a loan, get married and resolve most of their critical issues that they want to resolve in their young age. So I'm going to stop here because I don't know where the questions are going to drag us. But yeah,
okay, we'll
we're
talk
gonna
about
see.
it. But yeah, who left, actually he already left and he don't think about coming back in Bosnia. And what are we doing to prevent that brain drain?
Now
That's
it's
the
too late
biggest
because we're
question.
countering other countries' policies. Before, it was just us not doing anything or nothing, and they left. Now we're actually fighting other countries' interests, and we're failing at this. So it's a new stage of our battle. It's no longer we're passive and the kids are leaving. Now, if we want to attract them, we're fighting Germany now.
Yeah, it's a very hard situation. And Andrea, as a young representative of youngsters, you also mentioned me before this panel that you also conducted some kind of survey among young people in Montenegro. And is this pretty much the accurate situation, like pretty much the same situation as it in Bosnia or Northern Macedonia, or there are some differences?
Thank you very much for the question. Yes, we conducted a research, but it was a qualitative research. So we were not dealing with the data, but try to find out what the reasons for leaving are, but more importantly, what are possible solutions to the problem of brain drain and how to transfer brain drain to brain gain. Montenegro, as my colleague from Montenegro stated, lacks information about how many young people left. But for example, it was a few days ago when I encountered a research that said that in every 2 minutes, one person from the Western Balkans decides to turn their back to the Western Balkans. So let's put it in the time slot of the panel. So this panel lasts for 1 hour, meaning that during this panel, around 30 young people from the Western Balkans will buy one-way tickets. Another also research regarding Montenegro says that an entire Montenegro lives abroad, meaning that the number of Montenegrin diaspora is the same as the Montenegrin population now living in Montenegro. And these data were actually or initiated our research, I said qualitative one, that included respondents who are people, young people, highly qualified young people who left the country already, and not temporarily but permanently. So we wanted to hear their aspirations, their needs, and their desires on their path towards better life, so that we can suggest and implement some policies in Montenegro. I said that the first part of the research was about the reasons for leaving, and many of them were already mentioned by Yasmin. But there is one reason that surprised me when I was engaged in conducting the study. Namely, a lot of respondents very often said that the main reason why they left the country is that Montenegro is a highly pessimistic society. We asked them, okay, what does it mean that the society is pessimistic? And they agreed that in Montenegro, be it during a coffee or in media reporting or in public discussions, you can always hear about negative stories, about we always focus on negative examples, negative experiences, and that way we do not let positive stories, positive examples, and positive experiences come to the fore. And there are positive examples of people, for example, who stayed, who have a successful career in Montenegro, but we do not talk about it. That way, the respondents said that we are creating very often a false image of a Montenegrin society that is completely negative. So when we ask them, okay, what are the solutions? they said that it is really, really important that in Montenegro we tend to focus more on, yes, solutions, but then on the people who stayed when we are trying to communicate the problem of brain drain. When it comes to the solutions, we heard that young people who leave think that the education system is bad, and it is indeed. That's the situation, the same situation in Montenegro. So it is really important to invest more intensely and in education system. How and actually in what way? It is. I'm talking about Montenegro, but I guess the situation is very much similar in other societies of the Western Balkans. But it is important to improve practical knowledge of our students. It is important to harmonize the labor market and the education offer. That's something that's a huge problem in Montenegrin education system. Also, digitalization of education is really important, and it is important to foster civic education, critical thinking of the students within the education system. I completely agree that I myself do not trust the institutions in Montenegro. I think that they are weak, they are not to be trusted. I also think that there is corruption. I am aware of the fact that there is nepotism, etc. But I'm also aware of the fact that those problems cannot be solved overnight. And the best way, in my opinion, and the respondents within the study agree, is to target these issues through educating free, independent and responsible citizens of Montenegro. And that's something that we can, in the long run, do through the education system. And another important solution that was recognized by the respondents was that Montenegro lacks demographic policies. So demographic problems are not in the center of interest of those who are making decisions in Montenegro. And they suggested concretely that we need, firstly, a centralized database of people who left Montenegro, and then we need also an expert team within the government who will deal with the problem of brain drain. That team should not only be composed of government representatives, of course, but also of young people, of sociologists, of financial experts, of employees and employers, etc. So it is really important that the authorities recognize demographic problems as really alarming problems in our societies, and to really start implementing effective and strategic demographic policies.
Thank you. I would say like that Bosnian citizens are also pessimistic. They are not optimistic, and I think that everyone has some nice example of friends of ours that left the country and they're living a better life that we are living. Is there any strategy in Northern Macedonia concerning this problem and concerning this brain drain? What Northern Macedonian government should do to prevent this?
Well, I don't think that there is a clear strategy and what actually we should do. We are somehow, this is my feeling, that we are running after those, especially I can say in the about healthcare workers. We are trying to raise the salaries or to improve the conditions in the hospitals, but you know, there's always a lack of resources, lack of money. And you can do that in a period of 4 years or 5 years, but after 4 or 5 years, you know, this increase of salaries is, for example, for doctors, it's almost nothing, because as was already said, you know, like Germany can always give more, for example, to go abroad. I really think that we should do much more in North Macedonia, because according to the last study that was conducted by Westminster Foundation for Democracy, so the results were published last month, and we have the same results for third year. It means that 60% of the young people practically want to go abroad if they have the chance. And from them, like 27%, if they go abroad, they would never come back. And 37% also said that if they go abroad, there's very small chance to come back to live in North Macedonia. And this is a huge problem. I'm a journalist, and we are doing like journalistic articles, investigative stories about the problems that appears from these economic migrations, from the brain drain. For example, you have the hospital in Kočani. It is a city in eastern part of Macedonia. This hospital is like a regional center for smaller cities that are on the border with Bulgaria. So regional hospital for 120,000 citizens. They have today only 2 surgeons and 2 gynecologists and anesthesiologists. So if one of them decides to go abroad or to go to Skopje, they have serious problems with the functioning of the hospital, And the key point is that practically every citizen matters. If he wants to go abroad, that is a problem. It is also a problem, today in Skopje to find plumber if you are doing some repair works in your home, because most of them went abroad to work to Germany or Austria or other European countries. And I don't think that we have problem in North Macedonia, like we have strategies, we can make strategy, but then the activities which are proposed in the strategy are not always fulfilled. This is problem.
And Yasmin, what we can do in Bosnia if we want to prevent not only a brain drain of high educated people that you mentioned, but also to prevent the leaving of people who are woodworkers, I don't know, the builders, whatever. Yeah, mandatory
manual
people.
drain.
Yeah.
We face the similar problems. I think that no matter, we can bring the best experts in the world to draft the best strategies and best action plans. But I think the first step that everybody in the Western Balkans skipped is to change the normative setting. Our government, unfortunately, still thinks that we're exporting unemployment. And that's the biggest problem here. So by leaving, our young people are reducing the rates of unemployment in our country. And this is the only statistics that matter to them. And no matter what strategies they devise or action plans and so on and so forth, until they change this mentality, nothing will go positively. So this trend will just roll on. What we can consider and I said, and I'm going to repeat myself, we're no longer fighting our own passivity. We're fighting policies of another countries who are actively pursuing migrants from our region. They need nurses, they need IT workers, they need manual workers of all sorts of types.
But they are actually using our educational
yes,
system of free education that our country.
And they've been doing this for, there are so many agencies abroad who are actually recruiting people from the Western Balkans. They come here with their companies, they offer you apartments, free training, whatnot, so that you can go to Slovenia, Germany, just randomly naming countries doesn't really matter. What we can do at this point, and I don't think it will help, but this is the last resort, otherwise it's just down the hill, is to try to consider how valid is to establish an agency for circular migrations. And bear with me. There are many people. I come from Krajina, from Bihać, which is very close to Slovenia. There are so many people from Krajina working in Slovenia, from Cazin, from Velika Kladuša, from cities that are only 2 hours away from the nearest city in Slovenia and 2.5 hours away from Ljubljana. Most of Krajina-based young students already study in Maribor, in Ljubljana, in Zagreb. Sarajevo is too far away. It's 6 hours. These 3 cities are 3 hours. They have scholarships, they have boarding, and so on and so forth. obviously, if you go and study medicine in Ljubljana, why would you ever go back to Bihać, Sazin, or any other city in Bosnia and start a career there? However, they still have attachments. They have parents, they have houses, they have brothers and sisters, girlfriends, boyfriends, whatever. So there is a little bit of emotional attachment that we can use. If there are programs that our hospitals, we lost them. We already lost them, so that's it. But if our hospitals can conclude some kind of agreements with hospitals in Ljubljana or other cities in Slovenia to co-share the training experience, to pay for the part of the training so that the physician can stay 1 month in Ljubljana and 1 in Bihać, 2 months in Ljubljana, 2 in Bihać, half a year here, half a year here. So the circular migration can work to the benefit of the Bosnian healthcare system. I'm just naming this as an example. Because if a young physician who has been trained in Ljubljana stays there for half a year in the hospital and then half a year in Bosnia, they would also transfer the knowledge immediately. So the benefit that they want to derive is to have part of their life spent in Bosnia while they still have the emotional attachments. But they also want to stay in Ljubljana because they want to have money and prestige and so on and so forth. So the only option for me at this point, no matter how ridiculous this sounds, is to develop some sort of platforms for circular migration where our companies would offer semi sort of benefits to the Bosnian workers that intend to go abroad, and then sort of attract them to at least have part of their working skills here, part of their attention here, part of their whatever they can offer here. Otherwise, we are completely lost. We already are. This is just completely last resort to save what can be potentially saved. I can't really think of any other strategy that would be viable at this point.
You just gave me idea for my second question to Gordana, because you said that if people left the country, that is it is a good situation for parties in a government, and that is a, let's say, situation about clientelism among the young people, that some people who are not involved in politics, they will left, and somebody who are members of political parties, they will stay and they will have a better position for themselves. And they said, oh yeah, it's okay, let's go from a country, we will have a much more job. Is that the situation in Montenegro too?
As Andrea mentioned, and we have the same problems as a region, as my colleagues from Bosnia and Macedonia mentioned. And I would like just to point out the problem that Montenegro doesn't have population or demographic policies. And for us, very important for first step to have a strategy for population development or revitalization, and we need to establish some kind of body or office within the government to coordinate population issues like brain drain and aging population, and etc. Even if there are some population measures in Montenegro, they are short-term, unpredictable, and not evidence-based. Sometimes they are means discrimination, especially against the women. That's why evidence-based population policy is important for us in this phase, because sometimes when policymakers create politics without evidence, policy proposals are likely produce ineffective outcomes or negative consequences to those they are seeking to help. Unlikely it's happened in Montenegro with one kind of population measure, which called lifetime payment for mother of 3 and more children. By this measure, women are excluded from labor market if they want to financial support for having more than 3 children. This measure increase only female unemployment rate, but didn't increase naturally increase, and didn't solve our crucial population problem. That's why Evidence-based population policy for us is the best way against populism and policies that are not evidence-based and not have a real reflection of problem of our community.
Andrea, is there any chance that educational system in Montenegro can switch the trends?
As I said before, education is really important in this process because through education, for example, one of the biggest problems in Montenegro, as I said, is that the education system is not harmonized with the labor market. And then when you finish, for example, the faculty, because I'm talking about the respondents who were highly qualified young people, when you finish the faculty, you do not have the job because the labor market does not need what your occupation is. So that will be one measure. Then it is, as I said, important to really improve practical skills of young people who finish the educational process. For example, during this study that I mentioned, a lot of respondents said that their first encounter with abroad was during education process because they left either in high school or the faculty because they believed that their education system, Montenegrin education system, was not enough good for them. But I just want to stress one thing out. Because as a young person, I get the sense that we are even here too pessimistic. Maybe it's because I'm young, and maybe it's because my experience with other young people that I really believe that we are not lost, that there is a lot of space for improvement. For example, I know a lot of young people in Montenegro who are very much emotionally detached to our country and who need just a little bit of encouragement, appreciation, meritocracy in the society to decide to stay, no matter the salary they will get abroad. Then on the other side, I know also a lot of young people, and I met them through the study that I mentioned, who are abroad and who have way much bigger salaries, but who said, who answered to the question, will you ever return? They said yes, if the atmosphere in the society changes. So if the social and political atmosphere in the society changes. And as I said before, I think as a young person that we are lacking more positive stories. For example, I'm the one who stayed. I spent the whole my life being told that the biggest success, so I grew up with that sentence, that the biggest success you can achieve in Montenegro is to leave it. I resisted the pressure. I even made peace with the fact that a lot of my closest friends and family members left. They packed their lives and dreams in not enough big suitcases and bought one-way tickets. But I'm still here. I'm still here, and I'm still sitting here trying to share my thoughts and to convince at least one other young person to stay. I stayed because, to be honest, I lived abroad. I studied in Slovenia, but I decided to come back because I really cannot imagine myself calling any other place a home but Montenegro. I stayed because I really feel the responsibility as a citizen of my country to contribute to preventing turning off the lights in Montenegro. And I stayed because I think that there is enough of us young people who are willing to stay, that there is enough of us who will decide to stay, and that there is enough of us who will return if the country recognizes them. And that's why I said that demographic policy are really important. So I think that there is enough of us who can change the current situation. And finally, I left because during my work at the faculty and with young people through the sector of non-formal education, being at events like this gives me the opportunity to meet other young people who are a very strong wind in my back and really motivate me to forever buy returning tickets.
Okay, thank you very much. We are having a few more minutes left for some questions, but I would like to hear, because since we had only people in this panel discussion from Montenegro, Bosnia and Northern Macedonia, is there anyone from Serbia or Croatia? Because I know that census in Croatia was conducted a few months ago and the results are published. So there is also lack of citizens in Croatia. If we have somebody who wants to comment this, if we don't have, we already have one question. Nobody from Croatia or Serbia want to mention anything? No, okay.
Hello. I have a question for Jasmin Hasic regarding the circular migrations. Is that a theory or there is some example of successful implementation of that?
Yes, thank you so much. There are quite many. Oh, I can give you the links and the resources. I also think you should read the work of a Bosnian scholar living in Vienna called Alida Vračić. She wrote quite many policy papers on it, listing different Irish, Lithuanian, Romanian, Moldovan, Bulgarian examples of circular migratory sort of patterns. So I think many of those could be used for various reasons and within different sectors. So yes, Alida Vračić.
So referring to data from Andrea, which said every 2 minutes someone from Western Balkan leaves, I would like to know what your governments have done to address this alarming situation.
Thank you very much. As I said, the first step is to recognize the problem. I don't think that our authorities have recognized this as a problem, as something that is alarming and should be in the center of our attention. In Montenegro, the only ones who are talking about this problem are the representatives of civil society sector. We cannot hear about this, or the media. We cannot hear about this through the education system. We cannot hear about this by the politicians, by those who are making direct political decisions. So the first step is to recognize this as a problem, then to really establish and implement. That's something that that we were talking about previously. So it's not only enough to create policies, but to really implement them, demographic policies. The database that I mentioned, the centralized database of young people who left, is also important because that's the first step towards creating effective demographic policies, and to strengthen education system. That's also something that I mentioned, because through education system, in my opinion, that's the only way in which we, in the long run, can have stable institutions, can have institutions that are to be trusted, can fight corruption, nepotism, and all other motives of young people to leave. Because through education system, we are creating the citizens. We are actually creating an atmosphere in the society which is either with stable or unstable institutions, with corruption or with no corruption. So I think that we really need education system which will produce individuals who are independent, who are civic aware, who are free. That's also something that we are missing very much in the Western Balkans, I think. And the citizens who are aware of their civic responsibility, I would not say to stay in the country, but to really contribute and motivate other young people to do the same. I don't know if this answers the question.
My question is for Jasmin. So in Croatia, we do not have any clear data and statistics about people who left and then came back. So, but there is one research that which said that those people are people in retirement who are basically coming back to spend their money and to die. So my question is, do you know anything more about people who came back to Bosnia and Herzegovina after they left? So are people from Bosnia and Herzegovina leaving Bosnia and Herzegovina so they can never get back, or so they can learn something and then come back, or so they can go back to Bosnia in retirement?
It's a quite complex question. We don't have studies, so we don't have data. The stories that we know about come from different projects that are either sponsored by USAID or SDA, the Swiss Development Agency. We had two large projects called Harnessing Diaspora Potential, USAID in Bosnia, and the other one was Diaspora for Development by Swiss Development Agency, both 5 million euros each, so 10 in total. And they made a beautiful collage of 200 stories. A guy from Germany came back, opened up this. A girl from Turkey came back. So if you want to read individual stories and their motivations, there are resources available. I know Aida Ibracic was the author, and she's also a diaspora scholar. So the texts are quite nicely written based on in-depth interviews, but nothing has been systematically put in a data sort of analyzed, interpreted research. This is more, I would say, journalistic, but more of a journalistic outlook into the motivations rather than explaining what happened and why they decided to come back. What we can do about comparative examples, I think you should also read one study called Turning Tides, which speaks about Bulgarian migrants coming back during COVID-19. Obviously, they went to work in Austria and Germany, whatever. They were let go because the jobs were, the companies were closing down. They didn't have much savings, so they decided to take the savings they had and go back to Bulgaria because it's easier to spend the German money in Bulgaria rather than staying in Germany. However, since Corona lasted for 2 years, they also had to open up businesses in Bulgaria. And now when Corona is gone, it's not, but when it's gone, they don't want to go back to Germany. So now we had completely a different outlook. I think the study is called Turning Tides. I can't remember the author, but it's about Bulgarians who came back to their country during COVID to save money, but they ended up opening companies and deciding to stay in the country to give it another chance. So I think it's a good example of how this could be done. Unfortunately, there aren't many other. Sorry. Thank you for your question.
Okay, thank you for your questions. Thank you, my dear panelists. I think we are finished sharp on time, and I have only one technical information for all of you that you are stayed here, that we are continuing at 3:20. Thank you very much. We are going to lunch
Thank you.
now.